Ladies, let's talk about something that too many women ignore until it's too late: immaturity. See, a man can be charming, fun, and even say all the right things, but if he lacks maturity, your relationship is going to be a never ending cycle of frustration. Maturity is not about age, it's about emotional intelligence, accountability, and the ability to show up as a real man in a relationship. So, if you want something real, something meaningful, you have to be able to recognize the signs of an immature man before you invest your time, your heart, and your energy. Because the truth is, no matter how much potential he has, if he's not ready to step up, you can't force him to grow. A man who avoids responsibility and constantly blames others for his mistakes is not ready for a healthy relationship. Responsibility is a core trait of maturity, and without it, there can be no stability or trust in a relationship. When a man refuses to own up to his actions, he creates an unhealthy dynamic where his partner is left carrying the emotional burden for both of them. Instead of acknowledging where he went wrong, he will always have an excuse, a justification, or someone else to blame. This behavior is a major red flag because it means he is not capable of growth, learning, or making necessary changes. You may notice that every bad situation in his life is somehow never his fault. If he loses a job, he blames his boss. If he has a fallout with friends, they were the problem. If he fails to follow through on a commitment, he had no choice because of external circumstances. There is always a reason, always a way to shift the blame away from himself. This kind of man will do the same in a relationship. If there is an argument, he will find a way to make you feel like you're the one who is wrong. If he hurts you, he will say you are being too sensitive or that you misunderstood him. If he is inconsistent, he will act like you are asking for too much rather than admitting that he is not putting in enough effort. A man who refuses to take responsibility also struggles with accountability. When he makes a mistake, instead of reflecting and growing, he avoids it altogether. He may brush it off, laugh it away, or get defensive when confronted. He might even turn the situation around and make you feel guilty for bringing it up. This is a manipulative tactic that allows him to escape consequences while making you question whether you are being unreasonable. Over time, this creates an exhausting cycle where you are constantly justifying his behavior and making excuses for him or walking on eggshells to avoid conflict. This lack of responsibility also extends to how he handles commitments, whether it's in his career, finances, or personal relationships. An immature man will struggle to follow through. He may make big promises but fail to deliver. He may talk about future goals but never take action to achieve them. He may start projects and never finish them, constantly jumping from one thing to another without real progress. In a relationship, this means he will not be reliable. You won't be able to count on him to show up, to be consistent, or to take initiative. Instead, you will find yourself picking up the slack, taking on the emotional labor, and trying to make up for what he refuses to do. A mature man understands that his life is a result of his choices. He knows that mistakes are opportunities to learn, and he takes ownership of his actions. A man who constantly avoids responsibility, however, will always look for a way to escape accountability, leaving you in a relationship that feels one-sided and emotionally draining. A man who is emotionally unavailable and struggles to communicate his feelings will create a disconnect in the relationship, no matter how strong the initial attraction may be. Emotional availability is what allows a relationship to grow, deepen, and thrive. But when a man is closed off, it leads to frustration, confusion, and a lack of true intimacy. He may show affection in small ways, but when it comes to having real conversations about emotions, commitment, or the future, he shuts down. He might dismiss your feelings, avoid serious discussions, or change the subject whenever things become too personal. You may find that he only engages emotionally when it is convenient for him. He may be present and affectionate when things are lighthearted, but disappear the moment any deeper emotional connection is required. If he does express emotions, it may only happen in extreme situations after a big argument, during moments of crisis, or when he feels like he is losing you. This inconsistency keeps you guessing, making you feel like you have to work hard just to get him to open up. Emotional unavailability also manifests in his inability to provide reassurance and support when you need it. If you express concerns or vulnerability, he might downplay your emotions, act indifferent, or make you feel like you are overreacting. Instead of comforting you, he may distance himself, making you feel alone even when you are in a relationship. Over time, this can make you question your own needs and emotions, leading to self-doubt and frustration. A man who is emotionally unavailable does not lack feelings. He simply does not know how to process, express, or share them in a way that builds connection, leaving the relationship feeling one-sided and emotionally unfulfilling. A man who plays mind games, sends mixed signals, and avoids direct conversations is not someone who is ready for a serious relationship. Games create confusion, and confusion is the enemy of clarity in any relationship. When a man is mature and intentional, he makes his feelings clear, his actions align with his words, and he does not leave you questioning where you stand. But an immature man thrives on inconsistency. One day, he is fully engaged, calling, texting, and making plans, and the next, he is distant, cold, or unresponsive. This push and pull dynamic is a form of emotional manipulation that keeps you hooked, always wondering what you did back to the version of him that was once so attentive. When he avoids direct conversations, it is because he does not want to be held accountable. If you ask where things are going, he dodges the question or gives a vague answer that keeps you waiting. If you express your needs, he either downplays them or accuses you of being too demanding. Instead of being upfront about his intentions, he keeps you in limbo, feeding you just enough attention to keep you around, but never enough consistency to make you feel secure. When he creates unnecessary emotional distance just to see if you will chase him, he may withdraw, ignore your messages, or become less available, only to come back later as if nothing happened. This cycle of hot and cold behavior is intentional. It keeps you emotionally invested while he maintains control. A man who truly values you will never make you feel like you are playing a game to earn his love, respect, or attention. A man who lacks emotional control and handles conflict in an immature way will create an unstable and stressful relationship. Conflict is inevitable in any relationship, but how a man reacts in those moments reveals his true level of emotional maturity. If he shuts down, explodes in anger, becomes overly defensive, or refuses to address the issue, he is not equipped to build a healthy, lasting connection. Immaturity in conflict often looks like blaming, yelling, walking away, or even using passive-aggressive behavior to avoid direct communication. Instead of working through the problem, he makes it worse by escalating the situation or refusing to acknowledge his role in it. When a man lacks emotional control, his reactions become unpredictable. You may find yourself walking on eggshells, unsure of what will trigger an outburst or withdrawal. Small disagreements turn into major arguments because he does not know how to regulate his emotions. If he feels criticized, he may lash out instead of listening. If he feels overwhelmed, he may ignore the situation completely rather than facing it. This creates an unhealthy cycle where issues are never truly resolved, leaving you feeling unheard and emotionally drained. A man's ability to handle conflict directly impacts the overall health of the relationship. If he constantly dismisses your concerns, turns arguments into competitions, or refuses to have productive conversations, emotional intimacy and trust will break down. It is not about avoiding disagreements, but about how they are handled. A mature man can acknowledge his emotions without letting them control his actions. He listens, seeks resolution, and values emotional safety in the relationship. An immature man, on the other hand, will either overreact or shut down, leaving you feeling more disconnected every time conflict arises. A man who has no ambition, direction, or drive to improve his life is not in the right place to build a strong, healthy relationship. Ambition is not just about career success or financial goals. It is about having a vision for the future and actively working toward becoming a better version of himself. A man without ambition remains stagnant, relying on comfort and routine rather than growth and self-improvement. When a man lacks drive, he may seem content with mediocrity, unwilling to take risks, push himself, or step outside his comfort zone. This not only affects his personal life, but also impacts the relationship because he will struggle to provide stability, leadership, and a sense of purpose. You may notice that he talks about wanting a better life, but takes no real action to make it happen. He may complain about his job, finances, or circumstances, yet he makes no effort to change them. Instead of setting goals and pursuing them, he settles, making excuses for why things are the way they are. Over time, this lack of motivation can create frustration, especially if you are someone who values growth and progress. A relationship requires two people who are both evolving, pushing each other forward, and striving for better. But when one person remains stagnant, the relationship can start to feel unbalanced. Without ambition, he also lacks long-term vision. He may avoid planning for the future, refusing to think beyond the present moment. Conversations about goals, responsibilities, and commitments might make him uncomfortable because he is not mentally prepared to take on that level of accountability. If he is content with just coasting through life without direction, he will struggle to provide the kind of emotional or spiritual stability that a mature relationship requires. A man who prioritizes fun and instant gratification over commitment and growth is not ready for a serious relationship. When a man is stuck in a mindset of seeking only pleasure, excitement, and short-term enjoyment, he avoids anything that requires effort, patience, or responsibility. This is the kind of man who is always looking for the next thrill, whether it's partying, chasing new experiences, or keeping his options open instead of focusing on building something meaningful. He may enjoy spending time with you, but when it comes to taking the relationship to a deeper level, he resists, not because he does not care about you, but because he does not want to give up his freedom to indulge in whatever feels good in the moment. You may notice that he is highly engaged when things are fun and lighthearted, but starts pulling away when serious conversations about the future arise. He enjoys spontaneity, adventure, and excitement, but avoids responsibility, discipline, and commitment. He may prefer casual dating over exclusivity, claiming that he just wants to see where things go. While there is nothing wrong with enjoying life, a man who refuses to prioritize stability and growth will struggle to build a foundation for a long-term relationship. His decision-making is often based on what feels good right now, rather than what will benefit him and his partner in the long run. He may neglect important responsibilities, fail to follow through on commitments, or live a lifestyle that lacks structure and purpose. This kind of mindset prevents emotional and relational maturity because it keeps him stuck in a cycle of temporary satisfaction rather than meaningful progress. Without a shift in priorities, he will continue to seek distractions instead of investing in a future with real depth and commitment. A man who lacks accountability and refuses to take responsibility for his actions will struggle to maintain a healthy and mature relationship. Accountability is a key trait of emotional maturity, and without it, conflicts go unresolved, trust is broken, and patterns of unhealthy behavior continue. When a man refuses to acknowledge his mistakes, he shifts blame onto others, makes excuses, or avoids difficult conversations altogether. Instead of owning up to his role in a disagreement or misunderstanding, he deflects responsibility, making you feel like you are the problem even when his actions are the cause. You may notice that he rarely apologizes, or if he does, it lacks sincerity. His apologies may come with conditions such as, "I'm sorry, but you made me react that way," or "I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't." This type of response is a way to avoid to appearing to acknowledge the issue. Instead of working to change his behavior, he repeats the same patterns because he does not see the need to grow or improve. A man who refuses to take responsibility for his actions will also struggle to take responsibility for the relationship. He may avoid making decisions, fail to follow through on promises, or act as if commitment is a burden rather than a privilege. Lack of accountability also extends to emotional responsibility. If he hurts your feelings, instead of listening and making adjustments, he may accuse you of being too sensitive or overreact. Instead of reassuring you, he makes you feel like your emotions are an inconvenience. This creates an unhealthy dynamic where your needs are constantly dismissed and emotional security is never fully established. A mature man understands that taking responsibility does not make him weak, it makes him a trustworthy and reliable partner. A man who surrounds himself with negative influences and toxic friendships will struggle to maintain a healthy relationship. The people he spends time with play a major role in shaping his mindset, values, and behavior. If his circle consists of individuals who encourage reckless behavior, avoid responsibility, or disrespect relationships, he is likely to adopt those same tendencies. He may claim that he is different, that he does not let his friends influence him, but over time, their attitudes and actions will inevitably impact the way he treats you and the relationship. You may notice that he prioritizes time with friends who engage in unhealthy habits, whether it's excessive partying, disrespecting women, or avoiding commitment. When you bring up concerns about how his social circle affects the relationship, he may dismiss them or get defensive. He might say, "They're just my friends," or "I've known them forever," without acknowledging the negative impact they have on his growth. If his friends live irresponsibly, constantly encourage him to keep his options open, or speak negatively about commitment, it becomes difficult and to develop a mature and stable relationship mindset. A man's closest friendships often reflect his own values. If he surrounds himself with people who hold themselves accountable, work on self-improvement, and respect their relationships, he is more likely to do the same. But if he is influenced by individuals who avoid growth and encourage unhealthy behavior, he may struggle to break free from those patterns. The right partner wants to see him grow, evolve, and build something meaningful, but if he is unwilling to distance himself from negative influences, he may never reach the level of emotional and relational maturity needed for a successful relationship. A man who lacks emotional availability and avoids vulnerability will struggle to build a deep, meaningful connection. Emotional availability is the foundation of any healthy relationship, and without it, intimacy cannot truly grow. When a man is emotionally unavailable, he keeps you at a distance, refusing to open up about his thoughts, feelings, or struggles. He may seem present on the surface, but when it comes to deeper conversations, he shuts down, avoids the topic, or gives vague, surface level responses. This leaves you feeling like you are constantly reaching for something that is just out of grasp, trying to connect with someone who refuses to let their guard down. You may notice that he changes the subject when conversations get too personal, or he keeps things light and avoids anything that requires emotional depth. He may also dismiss your feelings, making you feel like you are overreacting or expecting too much. Instead of expressing his emotions in a healthy way, he may withdraw, become distant, or even use humor to deflect from serious discussions. This creates an imbalance in the relationship where one person is emotionally invested while the other remains closed off. A man who is not emotionally available often struggles with his own fears, whether it's fear of being hurt, fear of commitment, or fear of losing control. Instead of working through these fears, he keeps his emotions locked away, making it nearly impossible for the relationship to grow. You may feel like you are constantly trying to prove yourself, waiting for him to open up, but real love requires both people to be emotionally present. A relationship cannot thrive when one person is willing to be vulnerable while the other keeps their heart guarded and their emotions hidden away. A man who refuses to communicate openly and honestly will create constant misunderstandings and emotional distance in a relationship. Communication is the foundation of any healthy connection, and without it, trust begins to break down. When a man avoids honest conversations, keeps his thoughts and feelings to himself, or only gives half truths, he prevents real intimacy from developing. Instead of expressing what he truly wants or needs, he may rely on vague answers, change the subject, or avoid important discussions altogether. This leaves you feeling confused, uncertain, and constantly guessing where you stand. You may notice that when conflicts arise, he either shuts down or becomes defensive rather than working through the issue. He might brush things off with phrases like, "It's not a big deal," or "I don't want to talk about it right now," leaving important matters unresolved. He may also avoid expressing his true feelings about the relationship, making it difficult for you to understand where he stands. When a man cannot communicate openly, it creates a dynamic where one person is always left in the dark, trying to piece things together instead of having clarity and reassurance. A lack of honest communication also leads to broken trust. If he avoids discussing important topics, hides details about his life, or withholds his true thoughts out of fear of confrontation, it becomes difficult to rely on him. Instead of working as a team, the relationship becomes filled with uncertainty and assumptions. Healthy relationships require both people to be open, vulnerable, and willing to express themselves even when it's uncomfortable. A man who is not willing to communicate with honesty and transparency will continue to create emotional distance, making it impossible to build a strong and lasting connection. Ladies, listen. A man's immaturity is not your responsibility to fix. You cannot love, nurture, or wait a man into maturity. He has to want that for himself. If you see these signs, don't ignore them. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you can change him or that things will magically improve over time. A real relationship requires two people who are emotionally, mentally, and spiritually ready to build something strong. So recognize the signs, set your standards, and don't settle for someone who isn't ready to show up as the man you deserve.